Hey guys, today I'm going to be reviewing Silence of the Lambs. This film came out in 1991 and it was directed by Jonathan Demme. Demme has had a lot of success throughout his career in Hollywood. He's one of those lucky ones, but Silence, I think most would agree, is maybe his biggest success, or at least the one that was the most influential. And clearly it has been. I don't need to tell you that. For me personally, it was never a film I was a big fan of. You know, when I was younger, I saw it, but I never really gravitated towards it in an emotional way for whatever reason. But returning to it for this review, it had been so long since I'd seen it. I found myself having a renewed appreciation for a lot of its boldness. There's a lack of fear here that I like. You know, it's very stark and it's not afraid to stare right into that darkness. It's not afraid to dabble in the psychological and the philosophical, and certainly dabbling in the metaphysical. But for me, I think one of the more underrated aspects of the film is the hero, the protagonist, Clarice Starling. For me, it's all seen through the eyes of this woman, and I think she's a brilliant protagonist. I see her as a really compelling character. To me, she's reminiscent of like a Marge Gunderson from Fargo, and I think that, you know, Clarice Starling kind of paved the way for that period of more like female detectives and such. And, you know, just, you know, as a girl, I can't help it. We crave strong female characters and ones that are not pandering to us in a real girl boss sort of way that they are now. I like a character who is taken seriously enough to be allowed to be flawed. And I think that she really is. I mean, yes, objectification for her is a big part of her story in terms of how she is perceived as a young woman, but it's not a part of how we perceive her as an audience, and, you know, because it's not who she is. I think the film just has a real respect for developing her character in very subtle ways, but I just think that there's a lot of interesting subversive things going on there. And of course, when we think of Silence of the Lambs, we think about Hannibal Lecter, we think about Anthony Hopkins, and it's understandable because, of course, it is a scene-chewing sort of role that he has here, and also it's, you know, very romantic. It's to romanticize killers. It's a thing that we do, but for me, it's Clarice's show. Jodie Foster has the hardest job here, and I think she does a brilliant job, and I think she carries the weight of all kinds of conflicting emotions throughout the movie, and does it with grace, with, again, subtle strength that sort of sees through a lot of the weak-minded around her. But I like that the movie is constantly subversive in many different ways, but just in the beginning, the very opening sequence with the credits, it feels almost like we are getting into a movie right in the third act. You know, we're at the point of the climax where you have a victim running through the woods. It is a woman here. And instantly you get that feeling. She's running from something. The music is really intense and all of that. But then you realize very quickly she's not being chased. She's doing just an obstacle course. She's working out, and, you know, she's going one way and all the other people, all the other men are going past her, and, you know, it's a sort of feeling of, you know, independence. She is against the grain, and I think it sets her up very well. Somebody who has to take the lonely road. No words or anything, but you get just a perfect grasp of everything. She is self-reliant. She's quite petite, but she's also fierce. Also very pretty, but perhaps overworks and is too single-minded at times. She works very hard, clearly, to prove herself, especially to the men around her, to the people around her for sure. But, you know, I think more importantly, beyond any of it, she wants to prove it to herself. She wants to prove that she's worthy of the life that she wants. And because she is a pretty girl, you know, she has to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. And, you know, that's just how it goes. It's human nature. She knows that, but she doesn't whine about it. She just keeps her head up, and she proves herself more through determination, more through action. And it doesn't feel like, again, that romanticized idea of like an independent woman that is constantly shoved down her throats. This feels very real. She's constantly tested. She constantly makes mistakes, and she's figuring it all out as she goes along because she's young. She is inexperienced. Perfect for us, you know, like a perfect character for us to live vicariously through. And yes, her inexperience is kind of, it's genuine, it's very endearing, and I think all of that is handled really well. This movie is really good with details. Just every little line, every word means just something, or can be twisted in a different way. Every little gesture, they work very hard to kind of weave together, you know, the person's demeanor and the way they are perceived, because that's such an important aspect to this particular thriller, just in terms of the like the tension that is building with it. And you know, she has a lot of male figures in her life. Obviously, everyone around her really in this film is a male. And obviously, you know, her father she lost, and she's kind of looking for that maternal figure. You can go into kind of a Freudian thing there. But I think it's one of those things where even in the beginning of the film, you always get a sense that she's always going to be removed no matter what happens in the movie. You know, you get the sense she's not going to have some sort of romantic interest. That would be, I think, very insulting to the character. She's an outsider from the society that she fights to protect because of how it has affected her. And I think that confliction is a very palpable thing that anybody can understand. We always get things from her point of view. I love the idea of like, what's the very first thing you feel? What's the first thing you see and think the moment somebody enters a room? And it's because of all those little things she knows that she has to prove herself. But I just love Jodie Foster. I always have. I think that she is one of our great actresses, and I think part of why she's so good is because she's more fearless, I think, than a lot of actresses, or at least a lot of American actresses. She plays it honestly, and I think she really has a respect for filmmaking, certainly, and she can strip away that sense of voyeurism and get you to focus on the quiet intelligence of the character she's playing. She has always, to me, yes, she is a movie star, but to me, she always felt more like an actor. Somebody whose talent is the first thing that I think of, not about their, like persona or whatever. A lot of her character, though, I think is just the way she's photographed is absolutely brilliant. And, the cinematography here, I think, deserves all the credit in the world. It is one of the big reasons why the film works so well. And it is done by Tak Fujimoto. It is so masterful because this is supposed to be a very grim movie. And so you want to go for like dark colors. Everything's kind of gray and grim, just eerie. And that's, just really cliche in these movies, like these thriller movies, horror movies. And it's so easy for all of that, just in terms of the look, to feel monotonous to the naked eye. But he finds facets to that imagery. I reviewed Pig very recently, and that I complained about, just kind of the monotony of the color palette and just of the overall look of the film. And I think people want to know what I mean when I say giving depth to, the melancholy in terms of the visuals. But I think this is it. This is a perfect example. The textures, just the surface of faces and the colors of eyes just really pop. There's an emotion and an immediacy that is, to me, very engaging. And it could have very easily not worked. It could have been maybe too on the nose, but I think the blatancy is actually very refreshing. But this film has a lot of very experimental touches, which I really appreciate. I think it's part of why the film is so good, just from a filmmaking standpoint. It touches always on the macabre, touches on old European horror films. All of those archetypes are just echoing throughout the movie and how we perceive them. And maybe, this film is getting us to see it perhaps in a little bit different way. And it allows us to see this film, maybe not as realistic. It's more of an in-between, I think. It's a cross between a more modern crime drama and kind of an immersive, gritty film like that, but it's also heightened and abstract and very artistic. When I was younger, I actually struggled with those two tones, I think, coming together. I couldn't buy into it, I guess, for whatever reason, but now I think they work together brilliantly. They complement each other because the more expressionistic sides bring out the more cerebral aspects of things that you would be harder to bring out in other ways. The madness that is lurking always in plain sight and connecting it to all the main characters here psychologically, I think, in some form. The metatextual elements and, the psychological elements, it all comes from the cornerstone of the film, and that is, of course, Hannibal Lecter. And Lecter stands out from the rest of the characters because he's barely a character. I consider him more like an exaggerated archetype. He has a major function in this film. I just love that approach, and I love the contradiction between that kind of performance and all the other characters. It does almost feel like it's in a completely different movie. And, when they speak to him, it almost feels like a split from the internal logic, even though it's not. And having him played by somebody like Anthony Hopkins, I think they knew instantly that was the route that they needed to go. Just go for somebody that is a great thespian, somebody who has that Shakespearean sort of quality to them. And you tend to get that more from English actors. That British approach just naturally lends itself to a certain artifice, and it is less naturalistic compared to certain type of performers. And I just think that Anthony Hopkins, the moment he read the script, based on his reaction, he got it instantly. He gets the logic of the character. He gets that it is meant to be very separate, I think, from everybody else, and he understands the humor. Most importantly, it does feel like a modern representation of like a Lon Chaney. type of performance, or like a Fritz Lang villain. Like everybody else, it would be, I think, ridiculous not to mention just how great the scenes are between him and Clarice. They are very famous, the most famous scenes in the entire film, and they are fantastic. They hold up so well, I think. I love the way that he is really a mirror for a lot of those characters, and you really get a sense of that, especially visually in these sequences. And yes, he is a romanticized symbol of something that we all dare to explore within ourselves. Our own capabilities when it comes to being faced with very dark circumstances or being faced with the abyss. And there is a very like Colonel Kurtz sort of quality to this. Reminded me of like the conversation sort of at the end of Apocalypse Now, you know, with Brando and Martin Sheen. It has that sort of weird kind of in between reality and not. Never quite feels real. It's a sort of strange unraveling of the ideas underneath it, but always still intact. And it's the details of the dialogue as well. These are scenes that I think work, you know, if you watch them on repeat, they get more and more fascinating. You know, just the way that they play up the theatrics, the camp in particular. And I love just with Anthony Hopkins, I think he talked about how, you know, just how he came up with the character. And he said he did like a cross between like HAL 9000 and Katharine Hepburn. It's one of those things where it's like, well, I can't ever unhear that. The character is pure evil, and yet, even in an exaggerated, abstract way, there are shades to that evil. He's more a source of the evil. He is an embodiment of it. And then I look at Buffalo Bill more as just like a puppet, like a branch of that evil. And Buffalo Bill is maybe more that naturalistic interpretation of things. But yeah, as I say, a branch of evil. He's somebody that struggles with a lot of weaknesses compared to somebody like Hannibal Lecter who's fully aware, you know? So he's somebody that struggles with the facades of social expectation and how it affects him. And it's pushing him into madness, but there isn't that sense of all-knowing danger, that crawling on the edge of the razor blade, that famous quote from Apocalypse Now that you get the sense from like somebody like Hannibal Lecter. Strangely, Bill has a lot more in common with us than somebody like Hannibal Lecter, for sure. He has clearly many insecurities and struggles, particularly with his masculinity or femininity, sexuality. And those are things that you get a sense that his victims struggle with too. You know, his victims struggle with their appearance, body image, sexuality. There are certain things in the film that I do feel like maybe are a little bit too simplified. One of those things would be like Dr. Chilton, the character. Obviously, he's standing for the big bad establishment and like a sexist patriarchal symbol. But it's just the way he's approached it. Felt just really tired, cliche. It would have been nice, I think, for that character to have a little more attention paid to him. Just more of a complex component to the story, I think, would have been welcome. And it's not to say, it's because he's an asshole. I think that's important that he is an asshole in the story. But I just think it would have been more interesting to see him maybe struggle with certain decisions and just be more of a human, feel more flawed, have moments of kindness even come through, and not be so, well, you're so attractive, just... it works for somebody like Lecter, but that's because he's a specific type of character. I think if we had that with Dr. Chilton, because he is more a pawn in all of this, I think the final shot of Lecter as he's following him down the street would have been really kind of bone-chilling, much more conflicting, at least from us as an audience, more haunting. Definitely opens things up. But for me, the film is very strong. I really, really enjoyed it overall. And I think, again, Clarice is just a wonderful character. She's going to be one of those characters I think back to a lot now, and I think she just deserves far more credit. Obviously, a lot of movies have done that, and certainly a lot of movies have borrowed from Silence of the Lambs, to the point of nausea. But when you look at this film for what it is, I think it's very solid, it's very strong, and check it out or revisit it if you haven't. And that is my video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I am an artist and I do commission portraits, and I sell prints of my work. If that's something you're interested in, you can always go to the website below, or if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can email me. My email is in the description box below. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much as always. If you are interested in becoming a patron, the link to support that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.